Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the much talked about little speech from former Cabinet Minister George Eustice in Parliament yesterday, where he said that our Brexit trade deals were a load of rubbish and should never have been agreed. Now, there's a little bit to unpack in this one, but first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So also, just a reminder, I was on Max and Alex's Sunday roast at the weekend with Mark Greenwood of Van Man Talks. But here's the thing. It's not the most viewed episode. The one with comedians Matt Green and Nareen Skinner have that accolade. Can't have that, can we? Being beaten by professionals? Ridiculous. So I'll put a link in the description below. Some people have asked for it anyway, so that's my justification. But anyway, as I suggested in my first video today, I can keep moving on with another of the big Brexit news stories of yesterday. The government did refrain, after all, from doing something really stupid this afternoon, or at least at the point at which I'm recording this anyway. I mean, there's news of more bullying allegations against Dominic Raab, but, that's probably going to come up in PMQs, so that can wait until tomorrow. But anyway, George Eustice. He was the Cabinet Minister for DEFRA under Boris Johnson, basically the Department for Farming and the Environment. Well, he stood up in Parliament yesterday and basically trashed our Brexit trade deal with Australia and New Zealand as well, to an extent, which is essentially our only real post-Brexit trade deal, with a warning about how the same approach, didn't just criticise the deal, but the approach, how the same approach would stuff us in our current negotiations with others. He particularly mentioned the CPTPP in Canada, and it's raised eyebrows because this is a Tory attack on the reality of Brexit, because he was a cabinet minister involved in the process, because it's not exactly designed to achieve party unity, and because some wonder, is it a sign that Labour could be blindsided by the Tories on Brexit? So let's go through what he said first, then the likely consequences. So the first thing to note is that Eustice mentioned a clause at the end of our trade agreement with Australia that gives us the right to terminate it with 6 months' notice. So occasionally people will ask, how easy would it be for a future government to get out of what is a devastating trade deal for our farming? Or if we joined the EU single market, would that be difficult with our Australia, New Zealand trade deals and so on? Turns out it's very easy to get out of it at all. Legally anyway. Legally, there is a clause that allows us to get out of it. I can't imagine it would be a great move where diplomatic relations are with Australia, but the Tories don't really care about our international standing. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep damaging it. But Eustice also talked about the process of negotiating the Australia deal. How Liz Truss, who was in charge of the process at the time, was more concerned with getting it done before the G7 than in getting a good deal for Britain. It's like, I said enough myself. The whole process, and it wasn't even just Australia and New Zealand, it was everything. Like the Japanese trade deal. But the Japanese trade deal, like almost all of the others, is really just a carry-on EU deal. There's nothing really in it. But even that was rushed just to get the favourable headlines in the Daily Express. Eustice said that it was a very poor deal. He also said we need to sharpen up our approach to negotiations and beef up the role of Parliament in scrutinising these deals. Now, there's a strong element of hypocrisy here, because he was a cabinet minister when the government got Parliament to vote away their rights to scrutinise trade deals. Because it should be normal that Parliament scrutinises trade deals. The EU Parliament scrutinises EU trade deals. And he was also closely involved with the Australia trade agreement personally. It's all very well saying, I didn't agree at the time with the way it was done. He didn't feel strongly enough to say so, did he? And I know he can't say so and remain in cabinet. So he could have resigned, couldn't he? So the idea that he's speaking now out of concern for the country, locking the stable door after the horse has bolted, is more than a little bit disingenuous. Eustice also said that his contribution to the deal was preventing it from coming online for years. It was like 10, 15 years before it all comes online. But all he's doing there is saying he prevented the damage from this damaging deal being inflicted immediately. If indeed what he says is even true. But it's still damaging. And he didn't speak out against it at the time. If you want to see everything he said, I'll post a link to Hansard, which is where everything an MP says in the chamber is recorded. There was quite a lot to it, but why say it at all? Now, my first thought, actually, I don't know, it's the cynical me. My first thought was maybe he's letting Sunak know that it can be a right little bugger if he's left to run amok on the backbenchers, but he's really well behaved in cabinet with his extra 70 grand a year in his pocket. But the speech by Eustice is damaging for Johnson and it's damaging for Truss. It's not damaging for Sunak, personally. Sunak was cabinet at the time, but he wouldn't have been involved in those trade negotiations directly or agreeing them. And this could trigger a split in the parliamentary party. It could lead to some infighting, which means taking the focus away from voters and back onto themselves, which is not helpful to Sunak, unless Sunak wants Tories to start facing up to some of the realities of the particular kind of Brexit that Johnson imposed. It's all right going back to saying, Brexit means Brexit. Brexit meant a multitude of things to a multitude of people. If Sunak says, well, no, there is another Brexit, and there's a Brexit I think is better. If he wants to steer a different Brexit path, he needs his MPs to be able to talk a little bit more frankly about some aspects of it. So maybe Sunak fully supports the speech. Maybe he even encouraged Eustice to make it. But the question will be, to what end? The Australia deal already pissed off cattle and sheep farmers especially, so there'll be some rural voters who were already not impressed with the government over this. So now that the cat's out the bag, now that a former minister who dealt with the process has comprehensively attacked not just the deal, but the entire process that led to the deal, surely there will be pressure for Sunak to show a change of direction. Surely they'll want him to approach Australia with a view of restarting negotiations and doing them properly, and if they won't, triggering the self-destruct clause. That could put a lot of pressure on the government to act. Granted, with this issue there is time. There's a massive implementation period for the deal, several chances to elect a government that will bin the whole thing. Personally, I'm hoping we're back in the single market before it even comes online, and that will deal with it naturally anyway. We'll have the EU's deal with Australia then. I know people go, well, the EU don't have a deal with Australia. No, but they're working one out. They will have. And because another Tory MP has attacked some aspect of Brexit, people are talking again about the potential for Labour to be overtaken by the Tories and left with the Brexit baby. I don't think so, at least not with this. I mean, look at what's happened. So, Tobias Ellwood, a backbencher, and probably will forever remain a backbencher, a Tory MP has called for us to return to the single market. He did that months ago, or at least have a debate about it. Now, George Eustice has said that our approach to post-Brexit trade deals is pants. And that's it. I mean, we're all looking for signs that the Conservatives are shifting from their unicorn hunt, and there are signs that maybe they're realising it's time to be a little bit more sensible. But to go from one MP saying we should join the single market and one other MP saying our post-Brexit trade deals are crap, extrapolating that into the Tories are going to call for us to rejoin the EU in a few months so that Labour need to get moving a bit, that's a little bit of a stretch. Take Ellwood calling for us to look at the single market. He said that months ago. He has gathered zero public support from any of his colleagues for a desire to go back to the single market or even talk about it. Not even one or two other rapscallions in the Tory party, much less a large faction emerging going, no, this is really crap, let's go back. And it's certainly not members of the cabinet are saying this. Not even saying we can have a debate. It's still persona non grata, the whole issue of going back to the single market. As for Eustice, all he's calling for is more patience and caution with current and future trade negotiations. He's not even attacking the hard Brexit path that Johnson chose, or was constrained to follow. He's just attacking the particular way that the trade negotiations were conducted. Labour have got policies which would align us with the EU, the necessary step before we can even think about rejoining the single market. Yes, they're also saying that they won't actually join the single market, but the direction of travel is that way. When what someone says and what someone does are at odds, I pay attention to what they do. The policies are of alignment. The words are to calm down voters who are worried about more Brexit divisions tearing their friends and family apart. They don't want that anymore. It ruined relationships. They're frightened of that. So for Labour to get left behind on this, the Conservatives would not only have to commit to realignment with the EU itself, but they would also have to commit to rejoining the single market at least. Now, they will do that in time, but they'd have to do it in the next 2 years to make things awkward for Labour. It's not happening. The Conservatives may take a more pragmatic approach under Sunak, but it's a pragmatic, divergent Brexit still. It's caused by the same factor that caused Theresa May, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss to do the same. The threat of the ERG blowing the party up. Sunak is the first Prime Minister who can genuinely claim to be a proper Brexiteer. His 3 predecessors all pretended in order to obtain power. Boris Johnson of his predecessors is the only one who actually campaigned for it. And even then, it was late in the day. He had always argued to remain in the single market, indeed in the whole EU. He slipped streams to appeal to the Eurosceptic wing for a future leadership bid. But Sunak can claim he actually believes in Brexit. But although he might not have wanted the hard Brexit we got, he still faces the same pressures on him. He is showing every sign that he wants to strike agreements with the EU. There's a real window for agreement on the Northern Ireland Protocol. He's pursuing a defence agreement. See no reason why he should not reverse the government's position on a security deal, other than the fact that the Home Secretary Braverman will probably be an obstacle to it. But he's not going to align standards. He'll have a fight on his hands to even prevent further divergence of standards. The retained EU law bill, that's still a time bomb in need of dealing with. Sunak can tinker around the edges, but that's about it. But that is still welcome, because not only is that helpful to the country, I didn't really relish the prospect of 2 more years divergence and an economy so knackered I don't even know what Labour would do with it. It's helpful to Labour as well, this. The more Sunak does in at least normalising a more pragmatic approach, laying some groundwork, the quicker Labour can get on with their promises. Policies can be made. You can make any number of policies, but to implement them takes ministerial and parliamentary time. You've only got so much of it. So the more Sunak can do, the further down the road we will be when we get a proper government. Remember, this may not be for 2 more years. I'd really rather not be looking at 2 more years of needless divergence and economic ruin. So I'm delighted that Sunak may be trying to merge Brexit with reality for those 2 years. It'll do no harm as well, from my point of view, politically, if the Conservatives argue like rats in a sack over it. Can only help. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.